An Iranian underground missile city buried deep inside a mountain. A show of force aimed at Iran's enemies. A contingency plan to protect its precious arsenal from being eradicated by massive bombardment.
Okay, well, huge breaking news out of the Middle East tonight, because after a relatively quiet week from the U.S. military, given the fact that negotiations are still ongoing and there is what we've been calling the quasi-ceasefire, it appears that massive explosions have gone off tonight in the city of Isfahan, Iran. This is in the central part of the country near the Badr military airport, and according to U.S. sources, they blew up what appears to be a major ammunition depot. Although given what we seem to know about Isfahan, it does appear that the U.S. may have gone so far as using bunker buster bombs or something equivalent to blow up an Iranian missile city and potentially a top stronghold of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And why is that significant? Because, as you may know thus far, a big reason why Iran is able to hold on to any missiles at all is due to the fact that for years they've basically adopted the strategy of hiding the missiles away from potential conventional airstrikes, right? This is why, of course, despite the fact that Iran's conventional military is completely decimated, they basically hide the ballistic missiles underground, tucked in the middle of mountains and stuff like that. Then they pull them out immediately to shoot them and then put them back inside. But of course, if this is true, right, and if our speculation here is correct, it does appear that the U.S. military effectively just sent the message tonight that, hey, there's nowhere to hide. Thus far, the U.S. has not really gone after these missile cities to any serious extent. But when you look at these scenes of gigantic damage out of Isfahan, it would appear, if true, that we just did something along those lines. Now, you're probably asking the question as we speak, well, does this mean that the negotiations are done, or, it failed, they broke down? Certainly on the surface, that would be the likely and maybe common sense conclusion. However, for reasons I'll explain, I'm not saying this is a likely possibility, but we have to also consider the potential outcome that it may be the opposite, that perhaps this is a way to basically take total power away from the IRGC even more than they've already potentially had it, and essentially to say, okay, this is our chance to maybe put the people we're negotiating with back in more charge of the country itself, because we just blew up a major part of the IRGC itself. Again, that's speculation. I'm not selling you that as a fact, but I also would not rush to the conclusion that just because we did this, it means negotiations completely have gone nowhere. It could be a means to get even more leverage, potentially, essentially say, look, you didn't believe us before. You can absolutely believe us now. Yes, we are serious. But even furthermore, again, given the divided nature of Iran's government, that's really the reason I would say maybe let's not rush to those conclusions, and we'll explore both possibilities in today's video, right? On one hand, yes, it is true. There is what we've called, yes, the quasi, not a formal, but a quasi ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. It would seem like this is a breaking of it, despite the fact that, well, the only actual ceasefire there is over energy infrastructure, right? That's all the U.S. said. We're not going to hit Iran's power plants for the next 10 days. This is not a power plant. And so definitely, again, not a formal violation of it. Now, at the same time, it appears that the U.S. wasn't really doing a whole lot in general, just so that way negotiations could continue. And so on the surface, yeah, it optically may appear to be like that's what happened. Things broke down. On the other hand, there's another possibility. We'll tell you about that. We'll break these both down in today's video. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, let's just begin today by bringing you the details. So it's believed right now that the coalition dropped 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs. Bear in mind, by our understanding, this is something that the United States, this is basically technology that the United States only has itself. This is partially, by the way, the very reason why during Operation Midnight Hammer last year, Israel couldn't just go in and blow up the nuclear facility themselves. So we have not really utilized this technology thus far from what it appears. Now, why are we doing it suddenly now? Well, let's answer that question. On the Badr military base near Isfahan, triggering massive secondary explosions and ammunition cook-offs. And here's some other angles of it. Again, Isfahan is alleged to be a city that hosts a massive missile city underneath the military base there. And you can certainly just see, right, it's huge. It's a huge fireball over Iran tonight. It's apparently the American strikes on Isfahan were actually visible from geostationary orbit, seen here, the massive explosion as seen on weather satellites over here. So yeah, definitely the United States tonight sent a very massive, very strong message. At the time of recording this, we have not gotten confirmation from Trump. I'm expecting that will go out probably by, tomorrow morning or whatever. But yeah, I mean, definitely, right? This arguably may be really one of the biggest airstrikes that there has been since the first day, yes, of Operation Epic Fury. And you can just see those videos and pictures right here. Here's another one. Right, massive, whatever did happen here. Now, of course, that does drag us into the question of what about negotiations or what's happening? I find it interesting, for example, that just hours before we got headlines like this right here stating officials from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Bahrain have conveyed in private conversations that they do not want the military operation to end until there are significant changes in the Iranian leadership, which is genuinely very interesting because, of course, going into this conflict, you would have expected Gulf states to be the more neutral ones. It's alleged they didn't really want America to get into this conflict to begin with. But now all of a sudden, they're basically like begging us basically to finish the job and not, pull out early because of politics or something like that. I would also say then to these countries, well, I mean, if you want us to do that, then also you have to solve our problem, which is that obviously people do not want to keep on paying high prices for gas. So, hey, figure out alternatives to the Strait of Hormuz, right? Keep pumping oil over the overland routes through the Red Sea, things like that. Certainly, something to consider there. But again, okay, so we're hearing basically this type of narrative even out of the Gulf states. Hey, don't bother right now with negotiations yet. Iran still has a lot of changes they need to make in their leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But that is exactly why I find reports like this right now to be very interesting, which is these supposedly leaked details, if they are true, of a rift that is only growing between Pezeshkian, however you say his name, but this is the president of Iran, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And bear in mind, it appears tonight, we may have just hit a Revolutionary Guard stronghold. Because, as you're probably well familiar with, if you know anything about Iran, the IRGC are generally regarded to be the most fanatic, wild members, right? The hardcore ideological members of Iran's military/paramilitary. They're basically a political organization. I've compared them in the past to the Nazi SS. Now, if you were to guess, the biggest roadblock to negotiations right now in Iran is those IRGC guys, right? In fact, we've kind of seen this arguably from Iranian officials where they come out and signal they're willing to talk. Then the IRGC basically threatens to, kill them or jail them or something. And then immediate change of tone. They say, okay, no, we're not going to talk to the United States. It's very clear right now, the Revolutionary Guard are the ones in charge of the country, and something of a power struggle between the two factions here of maybe let's negotiate, let's talk to America. Hey, let's fight America till the bitter end are beginning to widen. And that's why I say, again, on the surface, yes, it would seem like America and Iranian negotiations have broke down. However, maybe consider the behind-the-scenes possibility this is all intentional to take away power from the Revolutionary Guard. Just something to consider. But take a listen here to the details. This is the alleged rift that's growing within the leadership circles of Iranian government.
שחשפנו לראשונה בחדשות 14 על העימות בין הנשיא פזשקיאן למשמרות המהפכה, היום הגיעו לידינו עוד ציטוטים מהעימות בין הצדדים. לפי מקורותינו, בשבוע שעבר, כאשר משמרות המהפכה מינו את זולרארד למחליף של הרג'ני, בתפקיד המזכיר המועצה לביטחון לאומי, פזשקיאן התנגד והשתולל. הוא טען שהנשיא אמור למנות את המחליף. משמרות המהפכה ענו לו בתוקפנות. אל תתערב. הנה כמה מהציטוטים מהעימות. הנשיא פזשקיאן למפקד משמרות המהפכה. אתם מנהלים את המדינה כמו מתאבדים. אין לנו סיכוי להתאושש מזה. אם זה יימשך עוד 3 שבועות, הכלכלה תתפרק. פזשקיאן, שניצח בבחירות לנשיאות את רליבאף, הוסיף: העם האיראני בחר בי בפער גדול. העם רצה תקווה כי רצה לשרוד. ומה שאתם עושים זה ההפך המוחלט. אתם מבטלים את רצון העם. לא רק שלקחתם ממני את הניהול בסוגיות הביטחוניות והמדיניות, מאז פרוץ המלחמה לקחתם ממני גם את הניהול של הסוגיות האזרחיות והכלכליות. כפי שחשפנו בעבר, פזשקיאן ביקש בעבר להיפגש עם מוצ'טבח המנאי, המנהיג העליון, כדי להתפטר, ונהנה בסירוב. לאחרונה הוא שוב ביקש, ושוב נהנה בסירוב. פזשקיאן ביקש להיות מעורב במשא ומתן עם האמריקאים וטען: עבאס ארקצ'י הוא שר החוץ שאני בחרתי. הסיכוי היחיד שלנו לשרוד הוא הסכם מהיר עם האמריקנים, כדי שהכלכלה תנצל מהתמוטטות מוחלטת. אחמד ואידי, מפקד משמרות המהפכה, התפרץ לדבריו ואמר: בדיוק בגלל זה אסור לך להתקרב למשא ומתן. אתה מוכן לתת הכל כדי שהאמריקנים יוותרו על הסנקציות. הנשיא פזשקיאן חתם את השיחה. אני מרגיש בן ערובה. אתם לא נותנים לי להתפטר ולא לעשות כלום. התפקיד היחיד שיש לי הוא לקרוא את התכתיבים המגוחכים שלכם. הציטוטים האלה מלמדים שלמשמרות המהפכה יש שליטה מוחלטת באיראן, ושהם מובילים קו קיצוני וקשוח במערכה.
Now look, as usual with these types of things, you never know 100% what to believe or not, but what I would point out is that this does seem to align perfectly with the power dynamic and what we've observed about the Iranian government thus far throughout this conflict, which is that, yes, it does appear that both the president and potentially even the foreign minister, right, that annoying guy that you always notice is on Western media for some reason, but it's also an interesting question, why is he always on Western media, right? So those two guys do appear to be maybe more moderate, sensible figures within the government. They're more open to having a deal with the Americans. As a matter of fact, the president allegedly here told the IRGC, we need to have a quick deal with the Americans because our economy cannot survive otherwise, and potentially even our country, which, yes, seems sensible, right? But the IRGC are not sensible. They're the fanatics, they're the hardliners, they're willing to effectively suicide themselves, and so that's why we had this whole back and forth. We reported to you earlier, a couple of weeks ago, by the way, about how the president tried to resign because he's sick of being controlled by the IRGC. The IRGC basically didn't let him because he was not allowed to have access to the supreme leader who's allegedly in charge, but we clearly can tell is not in charge. And so certainly there's a lot of chaos right now, and it does appear that the IRGC thus far have been the ones with the real power. I would argue this is why negotiating is sort of difficult. This is why the Strait of Hormuz is still kind of the total mess that it is. But hey, that's why I'm also entertaining the possibility. What we did tonight may have actually been a strategic blow to the IRGC. I don't know that for sure. There's the other possibility. This is just proof negotiations broke down as a whole, and this is basically the opening act for whatever special operation we're going to do as the final blow to Iran and the end officially of Operation Epic Fury. We don't know. That can go both ways, right? And certainly you have to question why there's such a big buildup of Marine expeditionary forces and like special forces ground units right now throughout the Middle East if we don't intend to use them. So these are also possibilities to consider. But, just some thoughts I had on that, this could be something to watch for sure. Okay. And by the way, I would venture to guess this is a possibility most people who are covering this are not going to speculate on, and I understand why, because it doesn't seem like the most obvious choice. But just a theory I'm kind of floating about that. And bear in mind, it may not be true. It may be the complete opposite. It kind of defies common sense, right? It defies what you conventionally think something like this is, but just something I would argue you should keep an eye on. Of course, oil markets right now have reacted to today's developments thus far. U.S. oil even now is over $100 a barrel, and so clearly the markets, the economy is bracing for something big to happen next. And I would argue regardless, this is probably the start of something, not the end of something, even if my theory there ultimately is correct. But again, that's just going to have to be something to watch. And here's only hoping, right, as a result tonight, in whatever way we did, if this is an IRGC stronghold, if this weakens their ability to have missiles or ammunition or bombs or anything to harass the Strait of Hormuz with and neighboring countries, that this gives more leverage within the Iranian government to the moderates and less to the hardliners, basically showing, hey, America is serious. America will use 2,000-pound bunker busting bombs if we need to. And well, there you have it. All right. That said, we'll keep you posted on this. I'm sure we'll learn more in the morning. But for now, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.